digital artists started in 2002 and were formed by Matt Clark, Chris Bird and Ash Nehru, and they came together to create the show for the Massive Attack 100th Window Tour. And what they all had quite separate skill sets. Matt was a fine art graduate in sculpture, I think, and Chris had lots of experience in production and technology, like touring with big bands, and Ash was a computer scientist. And their desire was to create a show that had a real-time data input, and at the time in 2002 that was something pretty new. And I guess the other desire was that to treat light as a pixel and pixel as a light, and overall to kind of dissolve that line between the audience and the stage and really bring people in and make them feel an intimate association with what was actually happening with the band. And so through that they developed a set of software tools to facilitate that show, which was written in C++ and was originally called Dragonfly 3 in 2023.
So that interesting mixture of people and professionals continued until now. I mean, we are 12 people, all different professions, all different disciplines. And it's really interesting the way we work. It's really a swarming kind of design and production actual process. I went straight to the end.
But that's okay, because that's the sort of path we've followed. It's been really organic. And I don't think when our founders started out, they set out to define who could be part of UVA or what skill sets were required. It was more to kind of dissolve that hierarchical nature of creative, and underneath that sitting technical and production, was to actually elevate that to sort of a feedback loop that fed each other. UVA used to do live performance and did so for a number of years, but we decided that to try and create work that had a sort of more lasting legacy. So things that existed for months as opposed to an hour. So we've been focusing on that really. We did a kinetic piece called Chorus, which was recently, has toured the UK and was part of Arts Electronica this year. And that was a big step for us to move from a kind of static and sort of really visually motivated and controlled piece into creating an actual instrument where sound was actually a crucial part of it, as it was in volume. In this case, we worked with Mira Calix, who's an electronic music composer, and she really, really understood our process. So when we wrote a patch for her for Reactor, she could compose quite naturally in that language and it wasn't an issue for her. Whereas I think with those kind of collaborations really do rely on a shared language and an understanding of tools and how people use them. So that's been probably a really fabulous piece for us because it integrates generative sound, C++ coding, mechanical pieces. Chorus actually integrates all the areas of our research and practice that have been leading to it, especially by bringing in mechanical systems and creating software control of mechanical things, which in engineering is really normal, but in contemporary artwork is kind of challenging.
It's really difficult. And that was the most interesting thing about Chorus, integrating new technologies and bringing new ways of control, and actually controlling the lights. It's an easy thing to control because they communicate really well, they're really well developed, at least on our field. But controlling a physical system, it's so difficult, makes so difficult, and having all those parameters like the sound and the light together with the kinetics of the piece itself was proper. I mean, as an idea, it's simple. It's an array of pendulums swinging, but in order to get them into sync, while you have an array of objects that they behave differently, even slightly, because of their friction on one of the cogs, you have to provide so many tools in order to control all the system working together.
But ultimately, the finished piece, you don't feel or sense technology in it. It feels like it just works. And someone came up to me and went, I watched that for a while, and it was only after a couple of minutes that I realised it was really, really complicated. And that was, the complexity isn't something that we're trying to promote. I mean, for us, we're really interested in process, but the end result, really, it should be in the background, and it's all about what it makes people feel and how it makes people behave. So that's a really, really big highlight for us, I think.
And I guess the third bit that we should discuss about the UVA's work is our latest work, that we moved to a more permanent field.
And lasers.
And lasers, yeah. So we're going to talk about two things. Our latest love is lasers. So everything started with a Y3 show at New York, at the New York fashion show. So it was the first time that we used lasers, actually, and it was a test for us because we were always attracted by them, but not in the rave trance fashion. We knew that they had potentials, but we've never seen work expressed like that before. So we tried to create out of elements of space, out of light, out of pure light. So, and that's again one of the properties of the tool that you use, of the medium, which is really important. That the laser has the ability to create lines in space, and that's what we started developing with Y3. And actually, our whole research concluded with Speed of Light, which was sponsored by Virgin Media, an installation in the Barts House in London. So we did, actually it wasn't one installation, it was 6 installations across one building, all connected together by sounds and light, laser light that was actually traveling through the space. So in each room you were meeting different kind of expressions of how the light can create space.
The key to developing, I believe, an identity and a role in this, and carving out a niche in this kind of world, is to make sure that your documentation and everything you do is edited and displayed in the most formal and magnificent way possible, really, because starting out, you don't have a budget like a big company does or an agency does to have PR and marketing campaigns and to dress yourself up in a certain way. So the biggest sort of weapon you've got to promote yourself is the work that you make and how you disseminate that promotion via all the kind of incredibly connected world that we have. So I'd say in terms of business development, your cornerstone of that is documenting your work and presenting that really, really well in bite-sized chunks in every resolution possible, and to always be prepared to talk to people and see the links between what you're creating and how that might inform someone else who has an opportunity, because we're in a world now where UVA have traditionally never been a funded organisation the way that a lot of English arts, vocational practices are. For example, like big, I don't know how you describe that, I can't really, but we've existed outside of this sort of funding strata, but yet we've benefited from it in some ways by when people who have, projects they want to commission, they approach us, and often it's a competition process. So I guess you can inform yourself by really being aware of what opportunities and residencies and things like that are out there, so that you're in the running for that kind of work, because there's, internationally there's huge opportunities both for gallery-based work, public work, architectural work, and these are often competition-led or, commissioner-led, so invite-only kind of things. And the only way people will know about you is if you've promoted your work correctly and in the right way. So I guess listening is a huge business development tool. And, we always try and make sure that whenever we go somewhere, we understand who our commissioner is and who supported that project, and if there's a brand relationship with that, to be really aware and sensitive to that, and try and understand what their aims and their outcomes are, because often when you get commissioned outside of a gallery or outside of an institution, there'll be an agenda that's set that needs to meet some kind of promotion or some kind of engage some kind of audience. And if you're sensitive to that, but you keep your integrity, then you can produce work that you're really happy with artistically, but yet sort of reaches the kind of targets and makes the client or commissioner happy. And that's something you really need to be aware of. So when people give you an opportunity to make work, I think it's really important that you understand what they need to get out of it, whilst really pushing it as far as you can go creatively. when you work with an agency or a brand, you'll always be given a brief, and it might be really wide open, but however it got to be that brief has been a process of a long exchange between agency people and the brand. And in a way, when you come into that brief, you have to sort of remember that they've already been working on this before, so you can't just sort of pile in and go like that to people. So firstly is understanding the brief and what they want, and how can your work exceed what they want and still push you forward. So there's a process of, big exchange at the beginning, a big talk, and it's really important that you identify who the decision makers are in your relationship with your clients, because there's usually a big circle of people, and so understanding that kind of structure and who you relate to is really important. And then the next step is obviously setting up milestones, what are they expecting you to deliver and when, and making sure that there's a really clear understanding between what they're expecting and what you're giving. So if it's a render or a QuickTime sample movie, make sure they know it's only going to be 15 seconds. Or if your client wants regular updates, make sure you don't spend all your time rendering stuff to update them and not actually doing the work. So measuring those kind of client demands and understanding them and putting them into your project workflow is really, really important. And then I guess on the other side of that is everyone always wants to know what it's going to look like or be before you've made it. So that's the biggest challenge ever. It's like, how do you create a representation that allows you to develop detailed design and still gives them confidence and acceptance and understanding? And so I'd say constant communication and not writing really long emails and doing more face-to-face and phone calls, because I think people get bogged down in emails, and that isn't always the most efficient way to work. And then whenever you've got a presentation, you have to be able to really smash it. You have to be able to walk in the room and make everyone in that room understand what you're trying to achieve, and confident and comfortable that it's going to get there and be there. And I guess the most important thing is the show day is the day. There is no being late. Don't make your renders too dark. That's really, really important. Be able to use a lot of images and few words, but then when you're presenting it in person, to be able to really articulate your idea. You don't need to fill up 58 pages of options. That's the other thing, is if you're going to present the killer image, present one. Don't present three.
And
just
most
one.
important, communicate the feeling of what you're creating. That's the most important. You have to do it either by visual images and stuff like that, or by expressing it by yourself, or physical objects or whatever. The feeling is really important.
Actually, physical objects is really, really important. So if you're prototyping stuff, that really helps. So showing them little model, physical stuff, in this world of constant visual stimuli, actually acts as an engager in a much more real way than you used to. It used to just be the render would say it all, or the sketch, but now people need to touch things and feel
when you
them.
say that you're going to create a mess around an object, put a piece of a mess and let the client hold it. It's really, really important. The artist, when he initiates the work himself, it doesn't really have to be socially beneficial, but we consider ourselves also as designers, so we're thinking of the work that we're doing on a particular context, really. So when we're talking about the scale of the installations that we do, and the place of the installation is always a public space. It's an open public space. So that makes us makes it really, really important. You have to be open to the public. You have to be as social as possible. You have to allow the people to take the role of the creator of the spectacle themselves. And in a way, that goes way back. I mean, when we're talking about cities, and when we're talking about the scale of our work, it goes back to 1960s when, for example, the Situationists started talking about how we can create situations around the city that will activate the city and will activate the public, so they will start making themselves. So it's a kind of thing that technologies have allowed to happen. Actually, you see projections on favelas in Rio at the same time that you see at the central London Trafalgar, and that's really, really amazing. That actually work of artists that they gave the example of doing something, and they provide the technologies or the ways or the methods to do something. They went to the people, and in that way the artwork themselves don't matter. I mean, when they are creative, but they matter afterwards, because the people are starting getting into them, starting creating themselves. That's what I think.